Okay, greetings and welcome everyone. We have a special presentation today. This is a bonus presentation following our 2021 December solstice presentation that we gave about a week ago. So if any of you missed that, you'll want to check that out. We gave some really great updates on the global situation, as well as a forecast of what to look forward to in 2022. Today we're kind of dialing it out a little bit and looking at the greater picture, the turning of the ages, which is the time period that we find ourselves in, a sort of shifting of energies, just like this solstice shifted us into a new year. We'll get to hear all about the shifting into the new great year today with our founder, Daniel Giamario, founder of the Shamanic Astrology Paradigm and co-founder of the school. So I have just a couple of announcements to make before I turn it over to Daniel. If you haven't already, we have a newsletter that'll be coming out at the new moon here shortly. So you'll want to sign up for that, which can be done through our website, shamanicastrology.com. And we do that every new moon and full moon. That newsletter comes out. And on the new moons, we also have our monthly members call, where we go over the different alignments and special events coming up in the lunation, the month ahead, which you'll have to be a member to get access to that. So that's something you can also find on our website, and you'll want to look into the different member benefits. And we certainly would appreciate any of you out there considering membership with our school. It's a great way to stay in touch with the evolution of the paradigm and all the updates that we're going to be bringing you, including what we're going to get into today here. So let me see if there was anything else that I wanted to bring up. Oh, just that we are going to try to have some time at the end of this call for a Q&A. So be sure to hang out to the end and write down your questions as they come up for you, and we'll try to make some time to answer questions at the end. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Daniel to take it away. And I'm going to pull up the slides here that we've prepared. Everything you'll have as well, the recording and all the slides on the class page when we complete. So thanks for joining us again, and welcome Daniel Giamario.
Thank you very much, Owen. Wow, I see a lot of faces that I know out there. I love actually since I can't meet with people in person, to be able to actually see some folks out there is really helpful. I'm going to be taking you on a journey here that will come at it from a few different angles, but I want to start off. We are here today under the auspices of Jupiter having just moved into Pisces. The moon is actually about 15 Scorpio, and I know that is of interest to actually members of our school that have a strong resonance with that area of the zodiac. And also Venus and Mercury and Pluto are in a tight little bundle right now. I hope that some of you might have had a chance to actually see that in the evening sky. Rather than going through the entire lineage, I did want to just to activate the energy here, to tune in to where the guidance is coming from, is to acknowledge all those people throughout history that knew, like now, that it was a turning of the ages. And I'm thinking of the Merlin, I'm thinking of the priestesses of Avalon, I'm thinking of the Magi, and I'm particularly thinking of the Magi, given that we are in that season leading up to Epiphany, which was a way of integrating the mysteries of the birth of the sun, S-U-N and /S-O-N, in connection with astrologers that were able to tell the signs, you know, in the sky of a turning of the ages a few thousand years ago. And also thinking of the people throughout history that looked at the sky and were able to look at the signs to be able to tell that it was a great shift of some kind. Well, we're going to look at how can we tell what is the nature of the shift that we're currently in. I want to just to briefly share with you why I love to invoke the Merlin. And when I say the Merlin, it was a title. There may have been an individual that a couple thousand years ago at a turning of the ages who was called that. But it refers to an individual working in concert with the feminine who knew that it was at a turning point. And the predicament of the Merlin was that he recognized what was of value from the past and was also open to the new transmissions that were coming through, whilst having to also deal with the situation he was in at the moment, you know, what was actually happening in the world at that point. The result of him looking back and forward was that he got a lot of flack from the traditionalists who wanted to only maintain the old ways, but also he got a lot of flack from the incoming transmissions because he was still honoring some of the good things of the past. And that always tends to happen when you are someone who is like a harbinger of some kind when we're at one of these turning points. And it does require a real openness to be able to know what was great about the past and to also be open to what's coming through. And that, after all, is what a Renaissance is. The ability to reconnect to what was great about previous times, and then having that as the foundation for dreaming the dream onward, as Jung would put it. Now, my own part in this, I'm in 2022 will be my 52nd year of being an astrologer. And I actually was connected to the astrological renaissance that was happening in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. And now that was the time period of a huge amount of excitement and hype and illusion and idealism around the age of Aquarius. And I've looked at that whole age of Aquarius thing from many different angles, including the awarenesses that came in the 1980s. So I've been looking at this turning of the ages issue for a long time, and I actually coined that expression in the 80s, the turning of the ages, and it's been kind of a foundational feature of our school from the very beginning. So I'd like to just take you on a short little journey. Now, a few of you may have seen the slides that I'm going to take you through now, but I've added something to it. And I know I think on this call, because this is not just for members, it's not just for people, there could be a whole lot of you out there that this may actually be the first time you've checked out this approach. So yes, let's go. This was the opening slide, all right, and you're gonna see that symbol again later in our presentation. But let's go to the first one there. Yeah. So this is a historical view of more recent time. After going through this, then we're going to take it all the way back. But I wanted to start with this because it actually has to do with also what I've researched over the years. So in the late 1800s, the beginning of the age of Aquarius is proposed by the Theosophists, and Sri Yukteswar announces the imminent end of Kali Yuga. Now, what's interesting at that point is that the scientists at that time period thought the precessional cycle was about 24,000 years. And his account of the yugas and his view of what was happening is really good. But he was using a figure of 24,000. Anyway, we'll come back to that. 1920s. Now, this kind of blew my mind because a great number of books appear announcing the start of the age of Aquarius. The School of Astrology, led by Elizabeth Reed, discussed the precessional cycles integrated with each other cycles of the solar system, and she writes of the need to develop an astrology that recognizes both the seasonal and the sidereal zodiacs, presaging the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. But I put that in here because one time I was on a tour doing seminars in Nevada City, and there was an elderly woman who came to my talk. This was back in the 1990s, and she said, "I want to show you something." And she invited me to her home, and she had a library of books all from the 1920s. And there were scores of them talking about the beginning of the age of Aquarius in the 1920s, which was very interesting. Now, February 1962. 7-planet alignment in Aquarius inspires many to announce the beginning of the Aquarian age. Just last week, I have worked with a client that I've known for many years who was born in that really interesting time period where 7 planets were in Aquarius in 1962. It was a very interesting group. She didn't have Aquarius rising. Now that would have been interesting, but 7 planets in Aquarius, and and at that time also, people were saying that's the beginning of the Aquarian age. Now I'm getting into my own personal thing here. 1961 to 1963, One Step Beyond, Twilight Zone, and The Outer Limits TV shows hugely influenced an entire generation coming of age. It has actually been said that whether you saw certain episodes of the Twilight Zone determined what direction you were going to take in the late 60s. It kind of bifurcated at that particular point, whether you saw a particular show or not. Very intriguing. It surely, it certainly changed me. Okay, let's go forward. Late 1960s, Dane Rudhyar helps inspire an astrological renaissance among young people with a global and historical perspective, using a non-predictive, deeply spiritual and psychological perspective. He was my mentor, and in fact, before I read any other astrology books, I read as many of his as I could find. In the book, Hamlet's Mill appears with the first description of the winter solstice's alignment at the intersection of the plane of the solar system and the plane of the Milky Way. Hamlet's Mill also was incredibly influential to the group of astrologers that I was hanging out with at that point. 1979 to 1999, Pluto inside the orbit of Neptune. 1980s, Gemario and Mardix first proposed what was later to become known as the galactic alignment through their work with direct night sky observation. Mardix went with galactic alignment. I went more with the turning of the ages. Both also proposed abandoning the age of Aquarius emphasis, instead use a larger, more global framework. Gemario begins using the phrase turning of the ages for these newly emergent understandings. 1997, I got the astronomer Jean Meus to calculate the exact midpoint of the galactic alignment, and that it would occur in 1998. And then the book, The Fourth Turning by Strauss and Howe is published, suggesting the US would reach the end of its millennium saeculum by 2025. Okay, continue. We'll come back about the fourth turning also. 1998, exact calculated midpoint of the galactic alignment. That was then followed by Jenkins's books, The Mayan Cosmogenesis, Galactic Alignment. We basically then spent a lot of time looking at the 2012 phenomenon. I'll come back to that too. The turning of the millennium and the Y2K crisis, 1999-2000. 2001, all visible planets in one small sector of the sky, causing many to suggest that this indicated the end and the beginning of a new age. I got into that for a while, actually. The Shamanic Astrology Mystery School begins proposing that the date range for the turning of the ages to be 1962 to 2034. And I'll give you an understanding about why those dates have come up. 2008, Pluto enters Capricorn in financial crash. Okay, continue. December solstice, 2012, hyped as the end of the Mayan calendar, certainly got the world's attention. July 2012, Bibhu Dev Mishra's research on the end of the Kali Yuga, unraveling the mysteries of the Yuga cycle, is published. Very inspiring and giving a lot of clues, which you'll see here later. December 2017, Saturn enters Capricorn, and then Uranus enters Taurus, and then Jupiter enters Capricorn, and then, of course, the 2020 stuff, which I'm not going to get into here, but you all know, most of you who follow astrology know that was a pretty big deal. Okay, continuing. This is added on from the time I gave this presentation before. So here we have the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius, not the age of Aquarius, the sign, but possibly, the constellation, but possibly a divine conjunction heralding the end and beginning of an entire precessional cycle or great year. 2021, 2022, square of Saturn to Uranus. 4 of them. We forget there's almost an exact one in 2022. US Neptune opposition. US Pluto return begins 2022. 2023 to 2024, multiple solar eclipse paths crisscross the US. 2023, Pluto enters Aquarius. 2024, US Chiron return. 2024 to 25, fourth lunar standstill within the turning of the ages timeframe. 2025, suggested end of the fourth turning for US, European, quote, civilization, and China. 2027, US third Uranus return. 2034, turning of the ages initiatory window closes. Now, let's go all the way to a bigger view. And we can reference this a number of times as we go through the rest of this presentation. I've created here a turning of the ages glossary. And I forgot to put a note on here that geologists will sometimes use these words differently, but this is the way that they're used by pretty much everyone else other than geologists. So I started with Aeon. Now this is actually the name of a Hellenistic deity. And actually it was a slightly different spelling of this god that is the title of one of Jung's last books. Jung was heavily into, in the last 20 years of his life, into alchemy and astrology. And this book called The Aeon that he wrote is very much his investigation of the mysteries of Virgo and Pisces. And it was actually working with the actual constellation itself and looking at the symbology of that particular constellational figure. I think this is possibly the most appropriate term for this inquiry. In fact, if you go to what Wikipedia says, it's very interesting. Associated with time, the orb or circle encompassing the universe and the zodiac. The time which Aeon represents is perpetual, unbounded, ritual, and cyclic. The future is a returning version of the past. This kind of time contrasts with empirical, linear, progressive, and historical time that Chronos, Saturn, represented, which divides into past, present, and future. It's the god of the cyclic ages and the circle of the year and the zodiac. It was later associated with the mystery religions and the afterlife, the mysteries of the Sibyl, the Dionysian mysteries, Orphic religion, and the Mithraic mysteries. Anyway, not too many people really talk about this one very often, but the master work of the final years of Jung's life was about this. So we are in the way he used it and the way Rajar used the word is connected to aeonic consciousness, which could be thought of as the zeitgeist of any astrological age. And that's how we're going to look at it here. Now, there also could be a zeitgeist of the entire precessional cycle. But here we're using it as the flavor, the meaning, the system of symbols, the way the world is in any different aeon. Okay. And then an epoch, or epoch, has a fixed starting point in time. It's like AD or BC with the suggested time of the birth of Christ. An era refers to what follows the beginning of an epoch, such as the Christian era, refer back to epoch. And then age, it's like an era, but more general. And then you can, I'm not going to go through every one of these things. Of course, it's quite connected to the commonly used expressions in astrology, like the age of Aquarius, right? There are scores and scores of suggested starting dates. And I think I'll just mention that this is a really important issue in trying to figure out where we are in the great turning of the ages, because I've seen at least 50, 60 different suggested starting points of the age of Aquarius. You know, and you need to have a very specific starting point for it to be an epoch. While you can actually have an era or an age that's more general. And I am going to be sharing with you here in this conversation here with you all today why we said 1962 to 2034, okay, as not like, okay, one exact specific date. A person might come away from this thinking, well, 1998 May is the specific date, but I think you can't really pinpoint it down like that when you're looking at 26,000 years. The great year, that's been used by astrologers. It was used by the Neoplatonists. The great year, one entire precessional cycle, 12 ages in 1 year, or sometimes, I'm not the only one who will do this. I'll say something like the 26,000 year. And then each of these years, 26,000 years long or so, is would be a month, one of 12 months in a year. Okay, we'll continue. These are other words that are used, and these are also used in our school. A saga, a long story, usually from oral tradition. And we use that word in our synodic cycle classes about the interweaving of Venus and Mars and Mercury. The saculum. This came to my attention when I read the book, The Fourth Turning. It's an ancient Etruscan concept, and they were a matrilineal culture. And they noticed that the oldest elder at any given time was about 90 years, and then there would be 4 generations that would turn over in the course of a saculum. Later, this got called a century, 100 years. And then what the writers that I mentioned before in the book, The Fourth Turning, applied this to the history of the United States and Western European history. More about that too as we go through. The Mayan long count, 5,125 years, said to begin 3114 BCE, but that is controversial. The long count was said to end December 21st, 2012, and that is also controversial. Recent research suggests that the Mayans backdated the start date to the year the Pleiades conjoined the vernal equinox. 5 of these long counts nearly equal the current accepted length of the precessional cycle. And I actually discovered, and I wish it was something I could have as something I could send to everybody. Maybe I'll try to make it happen, but it came out in the Journal of Archaeoastronomy, which is the really deep research regarding the backdating of the long count. To the point where the Pleiades was at the the spring equinox. Michael, Grofe. It was actually an amazing thing that lined up the belt stars of Orion, the hearth, the fire out of which new creation comes, which happens to also be right close to where the Pleiades are. It was actually researching this last night that I had this astounding recognition, realization that where I am living here, just outside of Metro Manila, is 14 degrees north latitude. Well, Copan and Izapa, which are some say Izapa, Jenkins felt this, which is the source, the first sign that we've ever had of the Mayan long count, is at 14 degrees north latitude. And the thing that's so amazing about 14 degrees north latitude, it's exactly 260 days between two solar zeniths. And I just end up here, you know, it happened to be at that latitude. It's 14 degrees north, which is, we could say, the starting point that had to be in that physical location in order to source the Mayan long count. Kalpa is also sometimes used, and sometimes it's considered 100 or 1,000 yugas. So what's a yuga? It's a concept from the Indian subcontinent. It can be applied to really long periods of time, or as recent research scholarship has established, can be synchronized with the precessional cycle. Like the Kalpa, there are many competing opinions. This is discussed in these presentations. You'll see the more recent research that I've done on this here in a few minutes. Then there are the concepts that maybe many of you have heard about, the 5 suns or the 4 suns. And the Mayans and the Hopi, actually Hopi say sometimes one way, sometimes the other, but that there were 5 suns and we're the end of the 5th sun. And in fact, spiritual teachers like Shunyamurti say we're actually entering into a whole new kalpa, that it's more than just the 6th sun that's taking place, that it's the whole ending and beginning of a whole kalpa. I don't necessarily go that far, but because we're talking about billions of year shift there. So the yugas were kind of the Indian subcontinent version of the precession of the equinoxes, as you're going to see. I like the 5 sun version because the numbers come out just like a precessional cycle. So you have like 5 different suns, 5 different great turnings within the 26,000 year cycle. Okay, continuing. So the precessional cycle itself, there's different dates that have been given to this. Often you see 25,920. Guy Otwell uses 25,800. In researching for this talk today, I have actually seen the 25,772. And we're going to have some slides to show you why this is important. But this encapsulated in these words here. It's the great cycle produced by the wobble of the Earth in space that creates the precession, the phenomena of different North stars over time as the creation of new ages. This is also the most important factor illustrating that every constellation will align with every astrological sign over the course of 26,000 years. There is an emerging view this precessional cycle is not constant and can vary over time. As I mentioned before, Yukteswar based it on 24,000 years. Hipparchus, the alleged discoverer of precession, once thought it was oscillated back and forth in a much shorter time, and then later 30,000 years was suggested. And then here we have about the galactic alignment, and then the turning of the ages, another term somewhat similar to galactic alignment. Our school suggests the time period 1962 to 2034. Now, the reason for that is that in the movement of the wobble, 1 degree equals 72 years, or in 72 years, the precession moves 1 degree. So we thought that would be an interesting way to conceive of the zone of the change, 36 years on either side. And you can see by what I was going through before, the 1962 has some pretty interesting attributes, right? Including the 7 planets in Aquarius. And but I think that marked the beginning of the turning of the ages. And those of you who are listening, you can relate to this to cultural history, to the history of music and how things shifted, you know, and there's a massive shift of consciousness that was happening and unfolding at that particular time. As I now understand it, some of it has more to do with the nature of that generation, but it's also happening within the turning of the ages, so it's not something to be taken lightly. And then we do have to put in here the cosmic year, 225 million to 250 million years, the amount of time for our solar system to go around galactic center. But we don't really spend a whole lot of time in the school with that one. As I would like to say, it's like how many human beings in the course of a lifetime has a kinesthetic experience with a cycle that long, you know. Well, we can actually have an actual connection point to something that's 1 degree in 72 years. It is possible to forget about it from one generation to the next, but it is something that's discernible. So that's why we think that the precessional cycle is the baseline for our human perception and the way we can connect into the physical reality that we're born into. So look at this fascinating stuff here. So 1 complete Yuga cycle, 25,352 years, precessional cycle, 25,920, then the 5 sun cycle of the Mayans, 25,605 years, which just as I love seeing stuff like that. Anyway, now let's go to, oh, okay, yeah, let's do this before we go to that updated research on all the dates. So the wobble, and incidentally, for those that are new to this, I'm very sorry that if you get lost in this portion of the conversation, and in fact don't even people that have taken our courses 3 or 4 times have a hard time getting how this works. We actually have a whole course on it. You know, one of our online courses is on the cosmology of the turning of the ages, and you can't really fully get it unless you actually are out under the sky and start to sense into it. But here's one way to understand it, and Alwyn has produced this slide for us. And it's over the course of 26,000 years, and this shows the approximate dates. North will point to different stars. So halfway back in the precessional cycle, 12, 13,000 years ago, is the star Vega, very bright star in the northern hemisphere. If you go back further, and you'll see why that placement is important when we get to the next couple of slides, Deneb in the constellation of the Swan was the North Star. And about 5,000 years ago, and this is a precession, you know, so it's moving left to right, you know, so now the star that's closest to exact north is Polaris. Thuban is only of like I think a 4th magnitude star, but it's all pretty much straight on exact north at that point in time. And actually, I learned at one point that the esoteric Japanese historians or metaphysicians had 7 world ages within 26,000 years based on different North stars. So they were looking toward the north. Right now we're in a Polaris age, and then you can see how many thousands of years it'll be before we get back to Deneb. Now, when Deneb is the North Star, that's the only time in a precessional cycle where a star in the Milky Way is north. I mean, like Polaris is not in the Milky Way. So that was a hugely important issue to the cultures that were existing during the time of the glaciation, where Deneb was the North Star. And oh my God, there's so many different stories about that. I can, I probably will list when we send this video out, a list of resources, but the vulture at the top of the world tree, the stork at the top of the world tree, the eagle at the top of the world tree, the swan at the top of the world tree. There's always this bird of some kind that is at the top of the tree. And when you have the Milky Way perpendicular with the horizon and Deneb is at the top, it's pretty easy to see how you can project that image on there. And quite interesting, the research on that. All right, that's looking north. But now let's actually, oh, and I think maybe let's look at the dates first, and then we can come back to this part. Okay, so the dates here on the yugas come from this research from 2012 by Bibu, always forget how to say his name, who put together, did deep research on all the different versions of the yugas. And I got these dates from his research. And then what I did, and Owen did a brilliant job of putting these things together. I'm not very tech oriented. And I matched it up with the astrological ages. So here you can see the dates and how they line up, where the different time, when the age of Virgo was, when the age of Cancer was, the age of, then coming closer to our current time, 10,759 years ago, the beginning of the age of Cancer, that was 8737 BC. And you can then match that up. And notice also here, geological time, the events that were happening. 11,700 years ago, the end of the lower Dryas, the younger Dryas, where the oceans rose about 300 meters. After the remarkable thing that happened when everything froze up again after the glaciation was ending. You can see on this geological time that 19,000 years ago, deglaciation was slowly beginning. But then something happened 12,900 years ago where things froze up even worse than during the maximum glaciation of 26,500 years ago. There's different, some people think it was a solar event that happened, you know, like a micronova or something like that melted everything very quickly. Most people who've done research on this believe that the event that triggered the younger Dryas was actually a cometary strike. And then we kind of had something like recently, it's been called nuclear winter, that everything froze up because the sunlight wasn't getting in. And then you had the solar event, and then everything melted, right? So now what I find intriguing, and I'm offering these dates and this view also to you all out there who want to do more research on this, because I certainly can't claim to get anywhere close to knowing the whole story on this. I'm even over there, we can actually add to this, putting in the other precessional stars, because here you can see Deneb on the far left, Deneb and the Milky Way pointed north at that time frame, and Vega was the North Star 13 to 11,000 years ago, okay, or BCE, I mean, but just to give you an example about where you can go with this information. I spent a lot of time going to the British Isles, And I became aware of something called the Glastonbury zodiac. And I connected that with a few other parts of the world that have a connection to Ireland and Scotland and England that tell the same story, because the imagery in the Glastonbury zodiac, Cancer is not a crab. Cancer is a boat. Now, if you think of Cancer as a boat, well, look what was happening in that age. Cancer, 10,000, look, 87, that was exactly, combine it with geological time. That was during the melting. You know, people had to be in boats to go to dry land. And in that particular zodiac, also the goatfish, Capricornus, was not that. It was actually a unicorn. You know, so you can see how unicorn could actually be applied to that imagery. There's a lot you can tell from this now, and just far more to be revealed. So here we see on the astrological ages, look on it where it says Aquarius, 1998 current era. So I put that in there because of the fact that that was the center point, or that's the exact point, we could say, where the solstice is exactly on one of the crosses. And we're going to go to the whole crosses issue here in a few moments. But then match that up with the yugas. And we see the ascending Kali Yuga. And then 2025 is a transitional period. So basically, if you look at the dates of the Kali Yuga, look where it begins. It begins 5,698 years ago, or 3676 BCE, right? And then it bottoms out, and the ascending part is at the bottom, and the transitional period ascending 2025, which corresponds to the fourth turning. So all of these things kind of match up. Now, I think, Owen, in the flow of what I'm describing here, let's go to the Kali Yuga itself. Oh, go back to that for a moment. Just so you know what it is you have as a resource here. This is another rendition of how the matching up of the astrological ages works with the different yugas. Let's just talk about the yugas for a moment. In the yuga system, you have what would be called the golden age, and then you would have a silver age, and then you'd have a bronze or copper age, and then you'd have the iron age. And each one of them was denser than the one before. So in the golden age, you could say that consciousness was more refined. There was very little materialism. The majority of the population had open hearts. You can actually weave in lots of interesting other cross references. You know, there's the view that actually maybe even the physical body itself was not as dense. And that's what the Theosophists felt. So that you would have this time period of refinement, higher consciousness. And it's very likely that the way humans were around that time were more like the elegance of a hunter-gatherer culture, you know, where you only worked a few hours a day, you know, and you were spending the rest of the time inventing rich, complex languages and doing ceremony and, you know, and deep communication with the mystery. And then it would go into greater density, the silver, and it would be said that at the silver age that 3/4 of the heart is available. in the iron. By the time you get to the Iron Age or the Kali Yuga, only 1/4 is available. Now, this does not mean that you yourself may only have 1/4 of your heart available, but that's just sort of an average of the population. And in fact, most writers about this would suggest that if you have an open heart in Kali Yuga, it's tremendously more significant than if you do in a golden age, because in a golden age everybody does, right? So if you're able to do the hard work of having the open heart in the Kali Yuga, the densest age, that's really significant and makes a tremendous difference. So Alwyn, let's go to the one about Kali Yuga, the definition of it, and we'll come back to that one. Not that one, just, yeah, that one. So one of my favorite authors that helps me understand pre-patriarchal times is Robert Lowler, who lived with the Aboriginal people in Australia and the matrilineal Tamil people in southern India most of his life. I tremendously recommend his books. This was from his book, and this goes back to the Vishnu Pranas. Kali brought sin into the world. In the Kali age, the proper order of human relations is reversed. Social status depends upon the ownership of property. Wealth has become the only source of virtue. Passion and luxury are the sole bonds between spouses. Falsity and lying are the conditions of success in life. Sexuality is the sole source of human enjoyment, and religion becomes a superficial and empty ritual and is confused with spirituality. Since we're on this particular flow, go to the next one, Ollie. Multiple additional inversions abound, and I'm referring this more to current time. When science becomes scientism, that is to say, like a religion. When definitions of things are altered whenever it serves the controllers. When a social media profile is more important than actual and truthful human connection. When consensus reality and utilitarianism, the greater good, attacks genuine diversity, and with it the full spectrum of organic and original 1.0 human possibilities. And last but not least, the attack on personal sovereignty in an attempt to make an inner life obsolete. Many more examples can be given, right up to the ultimate inversion, human evolution, or quote, progress, leading to becoming artificial intelligence, which would be the deepest possible descent into materialism, the extinction of our connection to soul and spirit, and the most comprehensive Kali Yuga descent ever known. It will make the fall of Atlantis look like a walk in the park. That was not from Robert Lowler, that was from me. So now, let's go back, Owen, to the turning of the ages diagrams. So this, what I'm going to share with you now, it's hard to really do. And again, I'm apologizing to those who don't have the astronomical or the experience of the night sky background. But this is something that was huge among people like myself and Mardix in the 1980s, being able to see what was really going on to answer the question, if it is the turning of the ages, how do you determine that? And how do you know what time it is? So you need to have a framework that is the largest framework that our senses can tune into. And it turns out that there is such a larger calendric framework. And when we look at the night sky, it's the plane of the solar system. And that's how we're the sun, the path of the sun. It's called the ecliptic. And here we're looking on this diagram you're looking at right now. You can see where the ecliptic is marked. That's the path that the sun and the planets are always found in the sky, that plane. Pluto is sometimes is pretty far off the plane, but in general, the planets follow the same sort of plane as the sun, and the sun establishes the plane, and that's, astronomers call that the ecliptic. Then we have the other plane, the plane of the Milky Way. It's very tricky when you use the expression Milky Way, because actually Milky Way is used as the name of our entire galaxy. But then also in the sky, oh, there's the Milky Way. That's the plane of the galaxy. And it's like a band. So basically, as you're going toward the middle portion, the center portion of the Milky Way, and look toward its middle, the stars are thicker. And so you see it as this band of stars we call the Milky Way. In the sky, these two planes cross twice. One in this direction, and this diagram is also the area of the sky that at least 7 cultures that I'm aware of refer to as the Golden Gate, or it's where, well, though we now know that, see where the star is, that in the middle, that's actually very close to the great black hole at the center of the galaxy. So that's galactic center. And depending on how you want to look at it, the Golden Gate is where composting happens, but we could also think of it as the composting of the ego and the gate of ascension, right? So there's, depending on whether you look at it from a underworld perspective or a celestial perspective or any of the 3 worlds, we got this exit point there. And it turns out the bow and arrow of the archer is pointed to the Golden Gate. The stinger of the scorpion is roughly pointing to the Golden Gate. And that, you can't see it on this diagram, but I see it all the time now in the morning sky. The thyrsus, or the spear of Centaurus, Chiron, is pointed there too. So we've got these like 3 major constellational groups that are pointed to the Golden Gate. Antares is also sometimes, and Antares is the heart of the scorpion. Antares is called the guardian of the Golden Gate. And just synchronistically, I wrote about it in my Monday Facebook post, Mars and Antares are right next to each other now. If you look in the sky, morning sky, and you see Antares, there's another red star just to the left. They're about the same brightness, which is, so this is the time period where Mars is pointing out the guardian of the Golden Gate. Now, this is one, so I'm saying here, this is one of the places where there's the cross, where the plane of the solar system and the plane of the Milky Way cross. But what happened in 1962 through 2034 and exact in 1998 is at the December solstice, the sun was on the cross. And that can only happen twice in 26,000 years, and only once in where the December solstice will be there. So 12, 13,000 years ago, it was the other solstice that was there. And think of the imagery there. And even think of the iconography of the cross used by so many, certainly Christianity. I mean, you get a more equal kind of cross the further back you go, but it's like the imagery of being on the cross. And actually, for those that do ceremony, the solstice means sun standstill. It actually rises and sets at virtually, I mean, to our vision, the same point, 3 days. So the sun is on the cross for 3 days. The SUN is on the cross, and so the time period at the December solstice, when the sun is exactly on the cross, is 1962 to 2034, with the exact point 1998. When I was learning about this and starting to teach about this in the 1990s, actually as far back as the 1980s, you know who most understood this? Not astrologers, not astronomers, but it was traditional people, shamans of Native American traditions and so on, who I learned a lot of stuff from. They knew about this because they did this in their ceremonies, but not astrologers. In fact, in the 80s and 90s, there was a counterattack, like, no, they didn't want to hear about this, and they were hooked in on the Age of Aquarius thing, but not on the greater cycles. Now, on the other side of the sky is the other cross, which is where the Cancer, the June solstice is now. I don't want to call it the summer solstice because I'm quite certain we have some people on the call that are from down under. So this is the June solstice. So here's the opposite side of the sky where the other cross is. So you see the ecliptic, the path of the sun, and you see the plane of the Milky Way, and where they intersect is kind of right in the middle of a circle. And that is the circle that the Lakota call the sacred hoop. And it includes some very prominent stars. We have Castor and Pollux, we have Procyon, we have Rigel, we have Sirius, we have Capella. The Pleiades are along there too. Actually, it seems to be cut off at the top there. But if you see the ecliptic line is going to be right where, if you look at the ecliptic line further up, that's where the Pleiades are, right there. And I find it amazing. So this is called the Silver Gate. And in all these different mythic traditions, ancient oral history stories, this is the gate where entrance happens. The soul will enter through this gate. And it's also we call this the galactic edge. So it's the opposite of the galactic center. I know the astronomers call it the galactic anti-center, but I don't particularly like that way of naming it. So the galactic edge, and so it's actually looking out into deep space outside the Milky Way galaxy. That's why the Milky Way itself looks quite dim when you see it coming through the circle. I also find it remarkable that virtually every origin story, and this is for those who are really into more the extraterrestrial model, almost every origin story that I know of comes from stars that are in this circle. Whether it's Sirius, whether it's the Pleiades, whether it's the belt of Orion, whether it's the fire pit that is. You see where that you know how to point that one out, Owen, where the fire pit is, just beneath the 3 stars of the belt of Orion. That was the Mayan fire of creation, right? And then the belt of Orion. There's so many stories about that being a homeland of humans. You know, when you go around the world, you find that like in Africa, they really are into Sirius as the homeland. Well, if you go to Asia, if you go to Hawaii, if you go to North America, Central America, the stories are all the Pleiades. And Australia, it was Pleiades. Anyway, here we have the sacred hoop. Now, 13,000 years ago, the sun it would have been the reverse, you know. So basically, the June solstice sun would be at the galactic center. Well, here we had the December. So here we have now the June solstice in the hoop rather than the galactic center. So that's another example of an inversion, you know. So and I'll give you an example also where you can see this. The Egyptian Sphinx, which is very much like a lion, is facing exact cardinal due east. And right now, if you're standing in front of the Sphinx and you look to sunrise, it will be the water bearer that comes up, not the lion. But 13,000 years ago, it would have been the lion coming up at spring equinox, yes. I see a message. I did not see the rest of it. Hang on, let me, every now and then I do see a chat, all right. Yeah, anybody who registers for this will be getting the recording and some other resources also. I'm also interestingly going to be doing this pretty much the same presentation to the Tucson Astrologers Guild on the 14th of January. So, I mean, that's a Zoom presentation, and I'm sure anybody could sign up for that also to support the Tucson Astrologers Guild. And one of our long-time members of our school is Gail Chilson, who kind of runs the show there at the Tucson Astrologers Guild. So it's always good to support her. Okay. So it's the same situation here from 1962 through 2034. If you look toward the other side of the sky, then you have the turning of the ages represented in this portion of the sky. And then you put this together with the different North Stars. And this is all because of the most important motions of our planet Earth in space. The tilt and the wobble and the various cycles of our physical Earth in space. Again, I know this might be beyond what some people who have never heard of this before, we have a whole course on it, but it is truly the foundational piece for understanding what time it is. Because it's like if you look at a clock and all you see are the hands, but you don't see the framework of the clock, then there's no way of telling what time it is. So you need to actually have a larger framework, which is this remarkable feature of what we can see in the sky, which is the path the sun makes in our solar system and the plane of the galaxy, which our solar system revolves around in 250 million years. And we can see where they cross, 2 crosses. Now, I don't have a slide on this, but I've actually put it on a whiteboard. If you stretch this out 360, because you can only see one at a time, you know, so one is rising while the other is setting. But if you saw it stretched out, it forms an infinity symbol, actually. When we stretch out the 2 crosses, as if you were able to see them, you know, both at the same time. This may be, Owen, a good time to look at the logo. Owen?
Yep, just give me a second to pull that up.
Yep. So this has been for many years now the logo wheel for our school. And what this does is it is showing the relationship between two different zodiacs. So you have on the outside the 12 divisions then it has the name of the sign, the 12 signs that we're all familiar with. And then you see in two different ways presented the stars of the zodiacal constellations. And then next, just underneath them would be the pictorial image of at least what in the Ptolemaic tradition is what they perceived those constellational groups to be. And so therefore, you can see underneath Aquarius, so I'm just chose that one first, Owen. So anyway, you have Aquarius, that's the sign Aquarius, but it's in alignment with the goatfish. And there you can see the stars of the goatfish. Or then you see the sign Pisces, which is in alignment mainly with the stars of the water bearer. This is, it says 23,900 BC, but actually what we're looking at here is current time. Which would be the same. Okay, so I mean that's what we've done here. What Owen created here is a way of seeing what it would be like at any age. So here is now, and that was actually the same as what he had up before. You know, going a whole precessional cycle back is the current way the signs and the constellations line up. So on the far left, right in between Pisces, Aries, right in between water bearer, fish, 0 Aries, that's the March equinox, right? On the far right, right in between the sign of Virgo and the sign of Libra, therefore, right at the 0 Libra point, that is the September equinox. And this is laid out the way a chart is laid out. You know, you have Aries on the far left. It's just like a world chart, a global chart. At the very top, you have in between Sagittarius and Capricorn, and therefore right at 0 Capricorn, that's the December solstice. Right in between the Scorpion and the Archer. And then down at the bottom, in between the sign of Gemini and Cancer, and right exactly at the 0 Cancer point, it's right in between the Twins and the Bull. And that's right in the middle of the circle, right in the middle of the one of the crosses. And then at the top is the Golden Gate. At the top is the Golden Gate, in between the Scorpion and the Archer. And then at the same time, if you happen to really be into only the March equinox, and you want to know about this whole Age of Aquarius thing, we'll look on the far left. 1998, and that line that you see, the red line that intersects those two, that's set for exactly 1998. Although, I mean, in the zone, you're not going to see really any movement. I mean, so basically this would work from 1962 to 2034. And look where 0 Aries is. That is to say, in the northern hemisphere of the spring equinox. So what's happened is that line, that point of the March equinox has just barely moved into the age of the water bearer. But if we look at the top, it's also just barely moved into the age of the Scorpion. And relative to the fall equinox or the September equinox, we've just entered into the age of the Lion. And relative to the bottom there, which would be the June solstice, we've just entered into the age of the Bull. Now, please understand, I'm talking about the constellations here because they're two completely different zodiacs. One is the zodiac of the star groups, and different cultures have projected different imagery on it. But the reason why we put the actual stars themselves is that's the actual pattern of the stars. The astrosophists would call it the bones, the structure, the framework, the scaffolding that we see in the sky. And then we have the image, which are the Ptolemaic imagery, which come from actually mainly from the Sumerians, the goatfish and the archer, and those well-known images that we usually give for the signs. But here it's the relationship between the sign and the constellation that's important. So, for example, if I want to give another example here, yes, because this age of Aquarius thing, everybody hooked into that. Look at the far left. Hey, Lynn, sorry, it's really distracting, so thank you. Sorry about that. If you only care about the spring equinox, and we used to call that back in the 1980s, that would make you a spring equinox chauvinist. You're not taking into account the other three. We want to see a global thing here. And besides, the calendar that we even use, the secular calendar, is focused in on the solstice, not the spring equinox anymore, right? Even though we start the zodiac with 0 Aries, like March used to be the first month, but not anymore, right? So we have October, which is supposed to mean the 10th, Oct-10, right? But that comes from, 8, sorry, 8, thank you, Owen. Keeping track of all the stuff, thank you, appreciate it. So it's rather than 8, it's really the 10th, back from the tradition that March was number 1. Sorry, I digress. So if you look back over to the far left again, the stars of the water bearer are already bleeding over or flowing over, and then we still have a part of the fish. But if we have this larger scaffolding framework, what we're doing here, if you look at this diagram, that is a diagram of the 26,000 year with the 12 months of the whole year. And then it's dividing it into 4 seasons. All the earth people throughout history always use that 4, dividing into 4. 4 is, the 4 directions, the 4 seasons and so on. So therefore we have the 4 quadrants. And then we divide each quadrant into 3, and then you have the 12, and as you see it there with the 12 signs. But the great mystery here is, in fact, it comes really from the school of Ptolemy, 200 AD, where they actually did know about both zodiacs. And one of the questions in the school was, what is the proportion by which the constellation informs the sign? And that's exactly the question we're continuing to ask. And I think it's an incredibly important question at the turning of the ages, because maybe some of you out there who know the biblical thing on this, do you recognize the bull, the water bearer, the scorpion, and the lion? Because those refer to the 4 beasts, or basically in Ezekiel and Daniel and the Revelations, they talk about these four. The bull, then the water bearer was like the human, and then you have the scorpion, which they saw at that time as an eagle in that tradition, and then the lion. And those are the four. And so in prophetic tradition is that when the cardinal directions, when the four directions line up with those four, and they would have done 6,500 years ago, they would have done it 13. Well, yeah, in fact, we can illustrate this. So why not, if you can, Owen, look at 6,500 years ago. Right. No, that one. Right. So here we have the thanks. Absolutely. It's all over the place in the Bible, yes. So we've got the March equinox point, far left, is in between the twins and the bull. Now, what's pretty amazing about that is that Egyptian iconography shows this. Anytime you see that imagery of Hathor or the bull with the horns, and you see the solar disk or the moon within the horns, it's referring to this time. It is referring to when the crescent moon at the March equinox, or the sun, because look, it's right between the horns of the bull. If you can point out the horns of the bull, Owen. So that's where the sun would have been there, right in between the horns of the bull. And that indicated to them a new age, the end of the age of Gemini, moving into the age of the bull. And you can do any number of really fun things with this, going back in time, So look at the one about 13,000 years ago, when, right. So here, and I made reference to this. At that date, the March equinox had just started to go into the lion. So if you're standing in the front of the Sphinx, imagine yourself like right the galaxy at the middle, that's the Sphinx, and you're looking right toward the east. That's what you'd be seeing. You'd see the lion rising. And now it's the water bearer, the mirror image.
One thing that really helped this click for me was to recognize that the Milky Way is still going through this part of the sky.
Right.
So that cross never changes, and it's just moving around this circle. Like Daniel said, it's the scaffolding. So we find these significant points like sun at the solstices or sun at the equinoxes hitting different places of this scaffolding, 1 degree shift every 72 years. But that cross where the Milky Way crosses the ecliptic is always here between the Archer and the Scorpion and between the twins and the bull.
Yes. Yes. Now that always may not apply to 300 million years, but it certainly does within the time frame that which I look at as about 300,000 years. The same DNA humans have been here looking at the sky, and so it would have been the same. Although there would be different North Stars, there would be, in fact, on that really detailed graph you saw before, chart you saw before, there was a point when the twin stars of Pollux and Castor were on the spring equinox or on the March equinox. So this is really fun to play around with. There are certain writers that have knew about this. Robert Graves did. A lot of his stories, he researched this, and the White Goddess, and Greek myths, he took into account which constellation was in which season. But back to what I was discussing a few minutes ago. What is the proportion by which the constellation informs the sign? And if you imagine that over the course of 26,000 years, every constellation has a chance to be with every sign. What was the age of Taurus? Well, if we go back to that one about 6,500 years ago, for the 2,000 years after that, during that month, the bull was informing the sign of Aries. 2,000 years later, the ram. And it wasn't until 2,000 years after that date that it was even called a ram. The Sumerians saw that part of the sky as a field hand, an apprentice, kind of an indentured servant. So when you have a new age happening, you certainly don't want the leading edge of your age being an indentured servant, so then they started looking at a ram. But that's just only one part of the world. If you go to Australia, if you go to South America, their stories are entirely different. So when we ask the question, what is the proportion to which the constellation informs the sign, it's very difficult to answer it because you don't want to necessarily be hooked into the story that comes just from your culture, because a different culture might project a different image. But what Steiner thought and what the astrosophists thought, it's not the story that's projected on it, but it's the actual scaffolding itself, and it's the stellar energies that are coming through that that pattern that you can see as the bones or the scaffolding. In fact, Steiner at one point said something. I think he maybe you can make a decision on this. He really took it far. He basically said, if you come into a lifetime and anytime you look at the sky and all you think is that, oh, that is just beautiful, or that is wondrous, but you don't actually learn the patterning of the stars, that in the next life your bones will be weak. which I thought was pretty stunning assessment of it, that it really matters that we do have a relationship, not necessarily with the story is great, but with the actual pattern itself, to be aware of what that pattern is. And then the energies, the stellar energies are coming through. So if you look at the relationship between the constellational shapes, is as it were like focusing the energy coming in toward Earth, and then you have the signs, which are really an Earth phenomena based on the solstices and equinoxes. I mean, if you say you're in Aries, that does not mean has anything to do with what you think are the stars of the constellation of the Ram. It's because you're born the first 30 days after this March equinox, right? But then at this time in history, that star group is contributing to that sign. So we have to actually be aware of what the essence of the sign is and the essence of that particular pattern that you see in the sky. They're always interacting with each other. That's why we have different ages. So you have the age of Taurus, you have the age of the twins, you have the age of the boat. If we wanted to look at what the Glastonbury zodiac projected onto the constellation of Cancer that we call Cancer. And we are at a great turning now. So therefore, our discussion is what is coming through now with the water bearer at the March equinox, with the bull at the solstice point. At the other solstice point. And then also what constellations are at the equinoxes. Anyways, it's a tricky thing to wrap your mind around, but it's why we keep changing and updating and evolving the understanding of the signs. Now, for those that you may be questioning this, and I want to it kind of blew my mind when I first got it. So many people, including a lot of astrologers, but certainly the astronomers, they always think that astrologers have no idea what they're talking about because, you know, the signs are out of sync with the constellations. I've hopefully given you a start of having a different framework on it, because here's the key. The reason why the Hellenistic culture invented the sign-based zodiac was because the constellations kept showing up in the wrong seasons. Not the other way around, you see. So then they ended up making the great mistake of naming the constellations and the signs the same name, which is why the Steiner people, the astrosophists, and we borrowed this tradition from them, name the constellations not the name of the sign. We reserve the name of the signs for the signs, which are an earth phenomenon. And then we name the constellations by what we're mainly familiar with in our culture. I wouldn't suggest we name them that if I'm talking to an Australian Aboriginal or you know, someone who knows the traditions of the Inca or the Mayans. They have different stories, but it's the same pattern, the same cycles. Now, that's definitely a lot to take in. But if we go back to the larger story, the overall bigger story of the turning of the ages, because what I'm trying to establish here at this portion of our conversation is that it is very likely the end and the beginning of a great year, 26,000 year cycle. Even if somebody has a problem with that, it's very easy to establish that we're at least at the end and the beginning of a season. And certainly a month is less important than a season. It's just part of a season, just as 4 seasons are part of a whole year. Well, before we turn this, you know, maybe kind of get to a point where we can have some questions, let's go back to the bigger story. So Owen, maybe that graph or that slide that is the wave. So this is looking at it from the perspective of the Yuga cycle. And it's not the myth of progress. It's not linear evolution, as it were. As the god Aeon represents, the god of cyclic ages, the circle of the year in the zodiac, contrasts with empirical, linear, progressive, and historical time, which was Saturn and Chronos. So this is like an oscillation. And in any precessional cycle, in any, remember, they're all about pretty much the same time frame, whether it's the 5 suns of the Mayans, or whether it's the Yuga cycle, or whether it's the precessional cycle. It's about the same time frame that corresponds with the actual natural cycle of our Earth in space, the precessional cycle, the 26,000, to say it in a simple way. But it's up and down, up and down. So obviously at the Kali Yuga, it's on the way down. Now here is something worth speculating on. Some of the literature makes it sound like as we come out of the Iron Age, as we come out of the Kali Yuga, we start to ascend. But then it's like thousands of years before you get to a golden age. Well, there's an evolving, emerging view that maybe, just maybe, we're at the end and the beginning of 12 times 12 precessional cycles. And that would be 312,000 years, which just turns out to be now, as they keep pushing it back, a lot of the new stuff coming out of Australia and some of the DNA research, the complexity of some of the ancient DNA takes at least 300,000 years for it to develop. That maybe our species goes back that far. But maybe after 300,000 years, that it is a really major reset. It's something far more than just the end and the beginning of a 26,000 year cycle. But what that would mean, and what I'm speculating on here now, it's not like the beginning of a slow ascension, a slow ascending. And then, 13, 15, 18,000 years from now, we have to wait for another golden age. But it could actually go being directly back into another Sat Yuga. Now, what would it take for that to happen? So then really, we're talking about a tremendous reset, a lot of composting, because this journey into density, how much further can it go? As I presented in an earlier slide there, that the movement from Sat Yuga to Kali Yuga is a journey into deeper and deeper and deeper materialism. As a matter of fact, mainstream science, I don't mean like the a lot of those ones we follow in quantum mechanics and scalar waves and everything else, but I'm talking about mainstream. Consciousness is just a product of the brain, while pretty much any other tradition out there, for however far back you go, consciousness precedes matter, right? So, but in the Kali Yuga, it's all materialism, and so obviously the deepest descent into materialism is turning humans into silicon, and this is the final thing I want to leave you with on this thought. I'm a great fan of the new medicine, and particularly love Thomas Cowan, and he describes something. See, if I go back about to 2012 or even further back, when I was thinking about what these constellations are contributing to the signs, I thought it was going to be this dialogue between carbon-based life and silicon. And I thought, like we have Taurus and Scorpio, the bull and the scorpion representing carbon life, and have the lion and Aquarius representing silicon. I take that back. I think it has to do with the difference between water and crystals that don't evolve. You program silicon. You program those kinds of crystals, they don't evolve, but it's water that's living. So we are water beings, and it's water beings that are capable of evolving. So the deepest descent into materialism is the AI thing, and I definitely do believe that is the final blow to produce the kind of greater reset that we actually need. So the title of this presentation, what is the turning of the ages? Now, I hope I made some progress in being able to explain this and why it's been a foundational feature of our school. And I do have just a couple of announcements to make before we open it up. And I certainly welcome questions about anything I brought up here, and even screams of outrage, or even somebody saying I couldn't follow a thing you said. I appreciate that. Well, at least it kind of opened the door for your curiosity about these issues, and so that you can maybe have a better discernment when you hear people talking about the age of Aquarius. I've done a lot of presentations about this because when people say the age of Aquarius, it has nothing to do, or almost nothing to do, with the sign. It's the water bear, not what we call the sign of Aquarius. And this is, gosh, I've seen so many different waves of this since the late 60s. Anyway, now we know it goes back further, the late 1800s, the 1920s, and so on. And you're going to hear more and more about it. This is the bigger story. So certainly one of the things that we did not talk about here was, so what do we do about this? Well, it's the three worlds approach. You know, that what's happening on the planet is celestial. It's actually physically happening, and that's important. And it's also very important to do a complete thing of surrender. A lot of composting has to happen here, including our own attachments, you know, who we take ourselves to be, includes me. And the announcements I want to make. Number one, as we go forward, we're going to be unveiling a new website for the school. No exact date set. We're hoping for maybe around the March equinox or somewhere around that time period. And then the other announcement is that we're going to be unveiling, as a part of our school, an esoteric council. It'll be different from like a governing council, and it'll be a research and development to look into the evolution of astrology, also how this can apply to counseling and coaching, how it can involve sacred sites and ceremony, and also an evolving cross-cultural, full-spectrum approach to the different spiritual traditions on the planet, and how they're changing at this time. And that as a way, actually, of the creation of seed people, to have enough connection, kind of like where we started the whole conversation today, about we're all like Merlin, we're all like the priestess of Babylon, we're all here to remember. And even if I go back to the 1960s, I remember. And a lot of the young people today have no idea. And there was actually more awake people at that time. And it's pretty amazing. We knew it was coming. To be able to take it back to other times in history, you know, the other Kali Yuga times, and then to be awake for what's coming in, because we don't know. Any astrologer wants to predict what great mystery has in mind now, they have no idea either. I mean, because we're all in part of the great unfolding. But here's the signs and symbols and clues, as best as I can do, to offer to you. I saw a question on the chat. Now, maybe we can start there. Can you maybe show the slide again with the years for the different delineations, precession?
I think that's this one.
Is that the one, whoever was asking that, is that the one you mean?
And by the way, everyone will get a copy of these slides along with the recording once it's posted. And that'll be at the same link. You'll get an email also reminding you of how to find that.
Also, there will be links to the different blogcast presentations and seminars that have to do with the Aquarian age issue, that would have to do with the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction, will happen to do with, the most recent blogcast I did was called 300,000 Years of Human History, Involution or Evolution. So there's a lot of different resources. And of course, all these, this is for those that like to research and, you know, want to add some other things to this. I'm very open to getting feedback.
All right, we have a couple hands up.
Oh, wait a minute. So Carol is saying it was a different slide showing just 3 delineations. I'm wondering which one. You mean maybe the one that gives the number of dates of the 3 different, not that one, but the one where it shows how similar the 5 suns and the precessional cycle and the Yuga large cycle. I'm pretty sure. Is that the one, Carol, you meant? It's pretty amazing how that lines up like that.
Yeah.
Also included in the resources will be that original research article of the Yuga research that kind of shows the different ways it's been presented in the past and where he thinks that they went astray.
Okay. All right, so we've got a few people with their hands up. I think
Yep.
Sheridan was the first.
Yep.
Hi. Okay, my question, 2 questions. One is, why did you put on that slide? Can you not hear me?
Though at the first part, it was sort of not clear. Sorry, Sheridan. And hi, Sheridan. Uh-oh, she's freezing up.
Yeah.
We were actually able to hear you, Sheridan. It was just a little choppy in the beginning.
I'll turn my video off to see if that helps. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, great. My 2 questions. One, on that slide, you wrote the age of Aquarius started 1998, and I'm curious why you put that year specifically. And then also, you've talked about the fact that Dane Rajar will talk about that the age of Aquarius is starting because of Virgo moving over Lion. And I don't understand why that is. So those are my 2 questions.
Yeah. The 1998 is the center point of that 1 degree every 72 years, right? So in 1998 was the exact calculated date of when the sun at the solstice was exactly on the cross. So basically the plane of the solar system intersecting with the plane of the galaxy, and then you have the solstice sun exactly at that point. That was 1998. And actually in John Major Jenkins' book, and he references that research that I did, he shows a diagram that shows the width of the sun physically, and even in the course of 10 or 15 years, it's actually past the exact point of the cross. But the exact point is 1998. Now, if you think of something like 26,000 years, is it really going to work to have it be like a epic, like when you celebrate a new year, 10, 9, 8, 7, Happy New Year? No, I think that that might work for a year, but for 26,000 years, I mean, to just pick one specific date, but you still, if you use the calculations, 1998 is the center point. And then we put 32 years on either side of that. So, I mean, 1 lifetime, or 1 degree every 72 years. Actually, some of the, in the Steiner school, actually, they thought 72 because of this issue, and because there was 4 nodal cycles that encompasses about 72 years, they thought that was the archetypal lifespan of a human being, 72. So then you have 1 degree every 72 years. So that's why we chose 36 on either side of that. Now, regarding the Rajar question, when Rajar never knew about this galactic alignment thing. He did, and so therefore that was something that he was still speculating, like one of the 50, 60 different possible answers I've seen over the years about when the Aquarian age starts, right? And one of his suggestions was, and he had a couple others in all of his writings, but one of them was, oh, I notice that the that the star Regulus will be overlaid by the sign of Virgo around 2011 is when it happened. And so he thought that that was, okay, maybe that's the beginning of the age of Aquarius, but he never really saw, he actually even in his writing said he thought that the beginning of the 26,000 year cycle, the end of the beginning of it was when the constellations and the signs lined up. But he didn't really ever get the thing I was presenting, which is that over the course of 26,000 years, every sign has a chance to be with every constellation. And the problem was they named them the same things. So that in the age of Taurus, the sign of Aries is getting a transmission from the bull. So they never really line up. Any of them can line up with any other one. So that was just, in one of the research projects I did, I used his 2 different dates along with, 50, 60 other ones, including, the ones from the time of Yukteswar or the 1920s or 1962, that was attempting to attach a specific date like an epoch. So what it is, we are an epoch, excuse me, how do you say that word? Anyway, but it's like we're looking at a zone, like maybe an approximation of this would be like the time frame from the birth of Jesus till when it's attributed to December 25th to Epiphany. So you've got this season in a year for celebrating the birth of the sun, right? And so this would be like a 72 year time period surrounding the exact bullseye point. Did I answer your question, Sheridan?
Yeah, so basically the reason why you picked 1998 for the age of Aquarius to start is just because the whole entire wheel is turning, because that's the okay, got it. Yeah, no, you did. And this was an awesome presentation. And oh my gosh, the slides, Owen, are amazing. Thank you so much. This was so good. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheridan. Okay, who's next?
Annalise, is that how you say your name?
Yes, hi.
Hey.
Thank you so much for that presentation. That was awesome. I am sorry, I don't really have input on it yet or questions, because I'm gonna need to review it on my own and sit with it for a while, but I just wanted to say thank you for that. And just to say, I don't know, I'm sure most of you, or at least some of you, are feeling this right now, but I just wanted to kind of share and say that I've really been feeling lately the importance of holding a certain frequency. I feel like, for probably a lot of us, we've felt the need to hold on to something within us that, may be different from our families or different from mainstream society. And we're like carrying a torch almost. And it's so funny because, most of my life, we have such tunnel vision as humans. And it's, a lot of times seemed like, okay, well, I knew I had to hold on to this part of me, this knowing, for a reason, but I didn't really see why. And I just feel like right now at this time, it's really starting to come together, big picture, and to be like, this isn't just because this is my personality and this is the way that I am. Like, we are really trying to ensure that a frequency doesn't go extinct through this period.
I agree. I totally agree.
And I mean, there are some things that have helped me, be healthy enough in my body to kind of hold that. And I've gone back to eating kind of ancestral foods, like trying liver and heart and organs, and that's helped, and just staying physically healthy and active. So I just wanted to share that, because I just been really feeling that lately, like just kind of realizing the big picture is coming together and seeing like, oh my God, there's such a bigger reason that we are holding to the frequency of these traditions. And it's not just, oh, this is a cool thing that we're studying.
So
like,
you're speaking to what has been the mission and purpose statement of my own life. right? Is to which is why the seed person idea is really important, and to remembering. I mean, if we had a long time, if we were like together for a day, what I would do at this point is I would put on a piece of music that goes back to what I started to speak of at the beginning about the Merlin. There's this amazing piece of music by Robin Williamson called 5 Denials on Merlin's Grave. And it's basically each of the stanzas, this goes back into pre-Celtic, pre-patriarchal history, and every stanza ends with, "And I will not forget." And that's, I think, really important. So thank you from your perspective bringing this out. I appreciate it a lot. Okay, who's next?
We've got Susan.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you. This has been wonderful. Nice to see you. Yeah, I'm not really sure how to phrase my question, so I'll just say some things. I'm coming back to the part of your sharing about the connection between the constellation and the signs.
Yes.
And I'm still kind of stuck on, well, when they were named, how they were named, and if there is any kind of connection between the two, or was there in history at any time, maybe when they were lined up. And you mentioned Hellenistic culture naming the signs the same as the constellations. I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, the invention of the sign-based zodiac by the Hellenistic culture was quite a heroic feat, actually. I mean, they actually presented something that helped them make sense of the confusion that was happening. Because at that time period, the names of the constellations and the way the constellations were known came from Sumeria. And in fact, 10 of them are directly backed. You can see them on the cylinder seals, you know, thousands of years before the Hellenistic culture. Now, there were some revisions that were made to it by the Egyptians, but usually those pictorial representations of those constellations had been based upon seasonal phenomena, like when the waters rose, when the scorpions were on the ground, you know, things like that. And so what the Hellenistic culture realized was when they, said, okay, we figured out there's precession. You know, there was attributed to Hipparchus, although for thousands of years, the ceremony showed that people knew about that. So what they did is they came up with an earth-based zodiacal wheel, and then they attributed archetypal meanings to it. It's like it's a self-standing archetype in its own right. The 12 by 30, the different attributions of the elements, the different relationships between the signs. But the constellations are a whole other thing. And so therefore, it's the patterning of them that's making the contribution. But of course, each culture is going to attribute different qualities based upon where they are on the planet. A really great example of this would be is that when we name anything, why do we name it what we name it? Like the word for dog in China, if you maybe the first insight in it is something really good to eat. While other cultures, it's seen as a companion and a loyal friend. You know, you have the right to come up with different meanings for different things you see in the sky. I always, whenever I do this presentation in more detail in our 5-day course, the question is, what the heck is a goatfish? Well, the Sumerians knew what a goatfish was. It was connected to their creator god. It had to do with coming from the water. There's so many things you can actually delve into this, but so therefore that same constellational group was a unicorn in the British Isles. To say there is no connection is not accurate, but we don't know what the proportion is. So for example, the problem is that the attributes given to the sign of Aquarius, an air sign, is really different. And this is one of the things that Jung in his writing The Aeon was presenting, is that It's the celestial waters. It's water. It's the part of the sky that's water. And I'll just give you a very personal example. I have a 23-degree Libra rising, which at this time in history is the star Spica, right in the middle of the constellation of the Virgin Priestess. In my own life, the mysteries of the feminine, of the constellation in the sky that has most to do with the sacred feminine, has illuminated my entire life. That star Spica is more personal to me than a lot of the sign designations from the tradition about Libra. So that's just the best way I can answer that for you. There's some connection, but there would be, if you go back to 600 to 500 years ago, the sign Aries had a hell of a lot to do with the bull. So the blending of what is the essence of Aries combined with what is the transmission that's coming through from that star group. And that is the key to how sign, symbol, archetype, and story changes over time. While you have certain time periods in history that are, you know, that are hunter-gatherer, I mean, Lawler, that's why I put it on my slide there, that one of the attributes, according to Lawler, of the end of Kali Yuga is that always at the bottom, we have patriarchy. For like 3/4 of the whole history, as it were, it's matrilineal, that you know you're coming to a dissolution point when things become patriarchal. I really suggest his books on that. I hope I at least made a start. It's a very amazing and deep conversation you're bringing out, and hopefully I've given you some clues.
Thank you.
Okay.
Actually, the point that I didn't make is that it was after the Ptolemaic era, in the quote dark ages, when they just forgot that there was a difference, and so they ended up keeping the same names. So that's the confusion, which is why I mean, the Hellenistic culture, they had different understanding of it. They had the name of the signs, and they also recognized the Ptolemaic constellations. But that kind of distorted in the Dark Ages. We had to rediscover it. Even this whole thing of the galactic alignment wasn't even alluded to in any writings until 1969. You know, so anyway.
May I just add, then it's just when we're talking about the age of Aquarius and what that might mean, it's absolutely nothing to do with anything we would discuss when we're talking about Aquarius, the sign.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, I suggest looking at the video I did on that particular subject.
Yeah, thank you.
Who's next?
Okay. Tara.
Hi, everyone. This was awesome. You know, but it's funny, like when we speak about all of this as theory, you know, to be in this transition time, to be in this place where we're at this end of age, we're all feeling crunch. And when I see these dates, Daniel, that you put up with the US and the Neptune opposition,
Right.
moving into a Pluto return in 2022, can you speak to that a little bit, like as to
see, I don't know how. I mean, I've done 2 like really long presentations on the U.S. chart, and in fact, there's several long articles. Maybe I'll make sure that that gets included in the resources here.
love that.
To me, oh my God, I think the Pluto return actually started in early 2020, because that's when Pluto began opposing the U.S. Mercury. It's also, it gets overlooked sometimes that the natal chart of the United States is square Mars and Gemini. So this whole Neptune thing, God, Greg's on the call here somewhere too, who helped me with some of the research, that every time there's been a 4th turning, some of these planets are just so incredibly involved with the U.S. chart. And I come up with the word bifurcation, because when there have been the Neptune oppositions, and when the Mars and Gemini has been involved, and when there's been the Uranian thing, this is the only 4th turning where Uranus is not a Uranus return. That's happening a few years later in 2027. And it's all like the Civil War, the time period right before World War II. And now we're here at that point again. And plus the Pluto return, what do you think that means? And so in our research on it, it appears that every time the US has been in these turning points, they haven't gotten the lesson. So it would seem very strongly evident if you look at the chart. I'm not a doom and gloom guy at all. In fact, all of my research is always elevating what was the original idealistic potential of this country, but they've blown it over and over again. And now we have bifurcation like on a really extreme level right now. So I suggest you can see my longer presentations and all of that, including the original stuff regarding who the twins were. It all connects in with sex and gender and all kinds of things. So everything is involved in your question.
Thanks, Daniel. Would really appreciate that on the resources for this. I'd love to look that over. Thank you.
I was hoping someone would be interested, because it's sometimes the way how things are going by so fast, there will be all this research and it will be presented in a particular way and then it's gone. We're on to the next thing. So we'll try to put it all together in the resources. So thank you, Susan. Tara.
All right, if we have time for one more, I think we have one more person with their hand up. Emma.
Yeah, hello, Daniel.
Hey.
It's so wonderful to be able to be here tonight. This is beautiful. It's the accumulation of what. Let's see.
A little louder if possible, Emma.
Okay, it's accumulation of everything that life can give. What happens here, I think the time that we're in, if you take, well, let me start from the beginning here. I have Saturn, Venus, and North Node in Aquarius.
Yes.
And they're major parts of the whole chart. It's what's influenced me so much in my adulthood. We talk about this thing, the supposedly Aquarian, where we become enlightened. Is it still bad?
Yeah, it's hard for me to hear what you're asking, Emma. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll text you. I'll send you an email and tell you what I was trying to say.
Okay. That would be great.
And it's good to see you looking so healthy.
Well, if anybody was on this previous call last week, I think I'd had about 5 hours sleep in 2 or 3 days, right? So last night was great. I feel far more clear and alive and awake today, of which I have absolutely great gratitude for. Thanks, Emma. Let's see. I want to see if there's anything here on. Gosh, of course, when we're done with this, I'll be thinking of all kinds of things I forgot to bring up. Got to run out for a birthday party. Thanks, Kadia. All right. Now I got to get it together to get a nice resource list for you all. And thanks for showing up for this. And I think we probably had a lot of new people on this call. So this is our bonus free presentation. And I'm seeing if I missed anything here.
Sylviana's just asking if you can say anything about if this is leading to an immediate jump to the golden age.
Well, I kind of alluded to that. I mean, I think it would be rather, if we think of 12 times 12 precessional cycles, and if we actually look at what the seers said about what the nature of the Kali Yuga is and how much astounding inversion there is. I mean, the current thing happening in the world now would make Orwell and what's his name? In A Brave New World in 1984, it's like way beyond what they ever could have imagined. Plus the AI thing, it's pretty overwhelming. So I would love it if it was some way of kind of a more rapid composting, and the Gaia herself and the sun itself would have something to do with it, and we could go directly into prime Earth, you know, go directly into a golden age. I mean, geez, the idea of having to slog back up the hill just to get to it doesn't make any sense to me. And I think probably almost anybody out there from almost any tradition feels the same thing. So I don't know what more I can say about it other than people like Aurobindo and people like Shunyamurti and others that I track. They basically are thinking it is the end and the beginning of a whole kalpa, you know, and that the whole project to bring spirit into matter, the ultimate goal of involution. And I make a distinction between involution and devolution, because when it's going down like that on the yugas, that's devolution. But involution from a spiritual perspective is that the whole purpose of the journey here is to bring spirit into matter, you know, as if you're like stepping down. Everything is refined, more Aquarian, and then it becomes more dense. And then here we are in the densest age, you know, and so we're trapped in a scientism and a materialism and five senses. I don't want to have to go through all that time to get back up to the refinement, you know. Maybe it can be a jump off directly into prime Earth. I hope so. Hopefully that was helpful. That's the best I can do on that question. So anyway, I think we're going to probably have to leave it at this, and feel free to communicate with me directly about anything that might have been brought up. And you might want to consider, if you're not a member of our school, to join us and in the great project of creating seed people at a great turning. So it's enough for now. Thanks for your interest, and till next.
Have a happy new year, everyone. Thank you all. Take care. The recording will be posted when it's available, along with all the resources Daniel mentioned. So thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Daniel and Owen. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Good to see all the faces. Thanks.